some really valuable insight for you. And just want to get started by just giving you a quick idea of why I wanted to have this webinar today. And really it's because I have spent a lot of time talking with our clients over the last year or so since I started this new business. And the thing that I see that our clients struggling with the most is employee performance management and holding employees accountable. And I was chatting with my friend Skip Wiesman, who I've known for several years, about this, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about himself, but he's a workplace communication expert. And he had some great insight, and I just thought I really wanted to share this with everybody. So we're going to get started, and the first thing I want to do is introduce Skip. And Skip, why don't you introduce yourself, because you have such an interesting background. I think it would be everyone would be really interested to learn more about you.
Okay, great. Thank you, June. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from. And yeah, I spent the first 20 years of my professional life in minor league professional baseball. And whenever I tell somebody that, they get all excited. Oh, wow, you played professional baseball. And I say, well, no, I didn't really play baseball after high school because I couldn't hit the fastball. And so I decided to do something that would stay close to the ball game for me, and I ended up getting my master's degree in sports management and leading minor league baseball teams for 20 years. And after living at the ballpark for 20 years and having my entire life guided by the baseball calendar and baseball schedule, I decided I wanted something else for my life and a little more flexibility. And so after the 2001 baseball season, I decided to take what I learned in 20 years in creating high-performing teams in professional sports management into the regular small business workplace, and I've been doing that since 2002. And so that's sort of where I've come from, and it was a great career. It's the only thing I ever wanted to do since I was a 7-year-old boy. Realized I couldn't play the game, but I wanted to stay close to it. And the cool thing was I was able to go to a ballpark every day for 20 years to earn a living, and it was the most rewarding thing I wanted to do back then. And then as life priorities change, my focus changed.
Great, thanks, Skip. And I'm really excited that Skip is going to be joining us for the AEC Profitability Summit at the end of September. And he's going to be giving you kind of a preview of some of the topics we're going to be talking, or his topic that we're going to be talking about at the summit. And in this time frame, we're not going to be able to dive into all the solutions and everything that Skip has, but I think you'll get a lot out of this session and hopefully want to learn more about what Skip is teaching. So I want to start out and have you all just kind of think for a minute about your own firm, and I want you to imagine your company in the following scenario. Number one, there is no drama, right? Everybody is happy all the time, smiling, and never complains. The next thing, and the employees understand the relationship between the value they bring to your firm and their paycheck. And isn't that really what accountability is all about? We're going to talk a bit about this today. You never had to deal with poor results or passive-aggressive behavior. I'm sure we all know about that. Employees follow all of your policies and processes all the time. And every employee is a top performer. That is what all our firms are like, right? So we have a couple poll questions for you today that we want to try to get the mood of the audience here today and get a feeling for your opinion. So Leanne's going to launch poll question number 1. And
is that on a scale of 1 to 5, June?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to make sure. Okay, you should see that up on your screen, and we'll give you about 30 seconds to choose one answer there.
So on a scale of 1 to 5.
Sorry?
Go ahead.
Yep, on a scale of 1 to 5, how well does your firm manage performance? I think, June, what do you want scale 1 to be the
low end? Yeah.
The low end. Scale of 1 to 5, 1 being on the low end. How well does your firm manage performance?
And Leanne, can everyone see the results? I can't remember.
No.
Okay.
Can you? Did you find them?
I can see them this time.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, good. And I'll let you give the recap when they're finished.
Okay.
We'll give a couple more seconds. About 80, almost 90% of you have voted, so we'll keep it open.
A few more seconds. It looks like most of you have voted. So it looks like we have 9% said 1, 39% of you said 2, 37% said 3, 11% said 4, and 4% of you said 5. So 4% of you think you're doing an outstanding job of managing performance. And 15% of you said a 4 or a 5. So what that tells me is there's definitely some room for improvement, which is what I would have expected since you're on this webinar today. But I just wanted to give you an idea that everybody is kind of in the same boat here. And that'll give you an idea of how everybody, the mood of the people that are on this webinar today. And that helps Skip and I to understand where you all are coming from. So the real reality in most A&E firms, and what I'm going to do is I've kind of put up some things that I've been hearing lately. As I'm out in the field, as I'm talking to a lot of our clients every day, they keep telling me things that are going on in their firm. And I wanted to run some of these by Skip and get Skip's feelings and approach and understand, you know, how does Skip feel like this is affecting your firm's ability to really prosper. So first of all, the first thing I hear this all the time. Our performance management process consists of an annual review. So Skip, can you address that one?
Sure. And, you know, I guess there's two ways to look at this question. And, you know, it's great that you're managing performance on an annual basis and you're tracking things and giving people feedback. The challenge is, what else are you doing, or what's the part of the performance management process along the way? If it's just an annual review where, you know, let's say your fiscal year is, you know, January to December, you know, on mid-November or early December, you sit down with everybody and you talk about how they did for the year and you give people feedback, and that's really the only time they're getting, you know, any type of feedback. That's a problem, because they're usually, what happens is they're very stressful conversations. The people giving the performance review usually procrastinate on writing them up, and they write them up very cursory without a lot of detail or specifics. Usually there's things that are brought up that blindside the other individual, and it's just a horrible conversation that nobody likes to engage in, which is why everybody procrastinates on doing them. So what we need to do is create a system that's a little more fluid throughout the year, where there's more ongoing conversations. If it's just an annual review, it's you know, it's going to cause problems and really create some really negative morale in the workforce. You know, I've never been in a company that just did annual performance reviews where anybody enjoyed the process or liked the process or looked forward to it or didn't want to avoid it. I mean, it was a dreadful time, and we only go there because we know it's the one time a year we can talk about our raise or our bonus or whatever. And so falling into the trap, or the pattern, I guess, of just an annual performance review is going to, it's certainly less than ideal, and even worse than that. It's not the way you should manage performance. And I always go back to my sports background. You know, spending 20 years in sports and being a sports fan all of my life, in athletics, performance is managed on a daily basis. Right? You've got the box score in the newspaper the next day after the ball game. You walk into an arena or a stadium and you have this, you know, a certain view of something when you walk into the ballpark. And after you look at the playing surface, usually is the first thing that comes into review, and the second thing, your eyes gravitate towards the scoreboard. Every arena has a scoreboard. Why do they have a scoreboard? some people tell me it's to keep track of the score, to know how the game's going along. And I say, no, it's basically to sell advertising, because that's what I did for 20 years, and that was my livelihood. That's my little baseball joke there about performance. But, it is to just show how things are going. When a batter steps to home plate, his batting average is in full view of 50,000 people. And if he's hitting 136, not the likelihood of him getting a base hit, but if he's hitting 333, you're a little more optimistic. So the performance is managed every day in athletics, and it can't be as that draconian, I guess, in the business world. But boy, June, we can certainly do a better job of more consistent feedback loops with people as we go throughout the year, and not just wait for that blindsided annual review time period to step up.
And I know, Skip, when we get further along here, you're going to be giving us some tips as to what you should be doing. So we'll get into that soon. So the second thing that I hear all the time from clients is, well, we pretty much give everyone the same percentage raise, and everybody gets a bonus even if they stink, and that type of thing. And that really didn't make sense to me, but I think it's a cultural issue, and I wanted to get your take on that.
Well, it becomes a cultural issue because, it perpetuates through the culture based on decisions that people are making not to differentiate between performers. And if you don't, and we're going to talk about this in a few seconds, but if you don't have some way to measure who's doing what at what level, you sort of fall into this pattern because you can't make a case. You can't build a case for giving somebody a 5% raise and somebody just a 1% raise or no raise or a bonus percentage, because there's no criteria. And if you don't have something to really base people's performance on, you just sort of go out there and hope to make everybody happy by giving them whatever the same percentage is. The challenge is you're not making everybody happy, because the high performers know that they're getting the same deal as the poor performers. They know, everybody in the organization knows who's performing at what level, at least anecdotally. And so you're not keeping people happy. You're really demotivating, demoralizing the people who are the good performers, and it becomes a why bother type of thing if everybody's going to get the same bonus. And it's funny because you bring this up, because I got to start working with a client last December, and the reason why my client decided to have me help him is they had just finished this process. And in our initial discovery conversation, he said, we just went through this for another year, and I'm tired of giving everybody the same bonus, and people that didn't deserve a bonus, who I would like to let go of and move out of the organization, just got the same bonus as a high performer. And I don't think that's fair anymore, and I'm tired of continuing to fall into this pattern. And this was the business owner who was telling me this, who had perpetuated this process for, a dozen years or so, and he finally got fed up with himself for continuing to engage in this practice. And I thought it's pretty funny. I know a lot of business owners, CEOs, top-level executives who fall into this pattern because they have not yet stepped up to really managing performance the right way.
Yeah, and I see this very, very often. I would say probably 80% of the firms I talk to complain about this being an issue. So I'm sure you have some good ideas for us in a few minutes on this type of thing. So number 3, the third thing that I hear about all the time, all our offices do things their own way, from proposals and estimating to budgeting and billing. And I love this little cartoon because I think, from an accountability standpoint, one of the areas that many of our firms suffer from is they create processes and procedures for doing things to keep people efficient, and then they don't enforce it, so everybody kind of goes off and does everything whatever way they want to, and there's really no consequences for that. Can you address that?
Yeah, and this is basic human nature. Obviously, this cartoon, I think, speaks to it well. Every individual is in their comfort zone, working with whatever they're comfortable working with, whatever they grew up with, wherever they were at a company that instituted whatever the tool was, and so this is what I like, this is what I'm comfortable doing, and change, we know, is very challenging for human beings, and so unless there's a real system for implementing the change, people are going to gravitate back to what they're comfortable doing, and so depending on how many people you have in this organization, teams of project managers, a PMO, or whatever systems you're using for your people, every individual could be doing it the same way. Now, this client I just did about the balanced bonus program, whatever you want to call it, it was a small firm. They only had, let's say, 6 project managers, but I can tell you each project manager has their own way of doing things, and there is no systematic way of managing projects in this firm that we're starting to address as we move forward through the second half of this year and create a company standard for our way of doing things, and everybody's going to be contributing to the process and negotiating it and everything. But it's just, if you're looking at trying to manage performance more effectively, it's really tough, I think, June, to manage performance if everybody has a different system and process, right? Without that consistency, it's tough to really judge sometimes effectiveness of people, because certain people do things a different way. Plus, it can't be a very efficient way of doing things, especially if you're talking about across offices, in different parts of the state or country or city. If you're just working in one office with a few people, that's one issue. But if you have to deal with this across offices over some geography, I can see this really being a problem in trying to manage performance and get consistent performance, because you're using different tools. It's got to be challenging.
Yeah, and one of the things I've discovered as I work with clients to try to uncover some of this is they really don't have an idea of how big an issue this is. And they kind of see the headquarters and everybody somewhat complying with, the majority of processes, but when you get out to other offices, they may have a completely different way of doing things. And this is especially true of firms that have made acquisitions, I find, or done mergers where they still operate as separate companies. And so it's a big challenge, and I think the first thing you have to do is understand how big a problem it is, because I don't think most firm owners and leaders really know to what extent this is going on, and finding that out is really important.
Yeah, and I think most people, a lot of business leaders are so focused on just what's getting done, what are the end results, how are those being generated. Oftentimes, the how doesn't necessarily matter as long as it's legal and ethical and within the scope of the project. At the end of the day, if we get it done, great. How Joe got there versus how Sally got there, people may not be focusing on yet. It's got to be tapping into efficiency and profitability if people are not on the same page doing things the same way.
Exactly. Okay, our next one is we never fire anyone. We have some D players on our team. I just heard this recently from a client of ours. And I said, really? You really have D players? And I said, but I would assume you want to have an A-plus company and an A-plus team. So how can you do that with D players? And I can't even imagine a baseball team having D players. So
yeah, again, sports I think is a great metaphor for this, because performance is managed on a regular basis, and if you're not performing or fulfilling your role expectations, then you're not in the lineup. And tomorrow somebody else is in the lineup, and when they put you back in to give you another shot, if you still don't perform, then you're down in the minor leagues, and if that you don't perform at the minor league level, then you're released, and you get an opportunity to pursue another team, to get a fresh start, or to pursue another career or endeavor. And so sports is a great model for this in the sense that they really look at this and move the D players out rather rapidly and don't tolerate it. Again, we have to be very careful in a business setting and dealing with people's lives and employment situation. and we just can't fire people, let people go that draconian the way a sports team does. But the reason why sports can do it is because they're managing performance consistently, and they're constantly seeing what that discrepancy is from where the person's performing versus where they're not. Business must get better at this. I feel like sometimes I'm the Grim Reaper going into a company because almost, I'd say 50% of the time, somebody loses their job after I'm there for a while. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I've never had one company owner, one client come to me, down the road after we made that change and say, boy, we really let that person go too soon. They're killing us across the street at our competition. It's always, I should have done that 6 months, a year ago, or 3 years ago. Because as soon as you make that change, the culture of the company changes oftentimes because it's such, those D players are such a drag on the team. And so this is sort of a result, June, of the other things we're talking about. The reason why, we don't fire anybody on the team is because we don't have the performance metrics to track over time to hold people accountable to it, so we can give them feedback that we see if they do or don't improve. I was talking to a business prospect yesterday whose company is taking my communication challenge, which is a way to really quantify the cost of poor and ineffective communication in the workplace. And I said, tell me what your biggest challenges that you've seen with communication in your 20 years of running a company. And he said, this is a big thing. I had a manager come to me wanting to fire somebody. I said, well, great. Well, let me see the paperwork. Let me see his last 3 performance reviews. And he said, well, we don't have any. And so he said, well, you're not firing him until you build a case. And so you're going to sit down, you're going to coach him, you're going to develop him over time, and then we'll continue giving consistent feedback. And then let's say after 6 months or a year, we might be able to fire him. So you've got to go back and do your work as the manager. And so people perpetuate these poor performers, or you like the alliteration, because of not having the performance metrics in place. And so we carry them on and we tolerate their performance, and it drags everybody down. It drags morale down in the organizational culture. And we wonder why, people are unhappy because they're looking across the table. Not this guy also, this D player also, June, remember, is getting the same bonus I got from the previous one, right?
Right,
So
exactly.
It's full of problems.
Yeah, it's a matter of consequences, too. I think when people know there's no consequences, it's kind of like your kids, if they know how far they can push you and what they can get away with, and if there's no consequences, they don't have any incentive to change their behavior.
Right.
So, all right, let's see. We got another one here. Number 5, we do not have metrics to measure our project managers. And that one always really surprised me. This is not true of all firms. I think some firms do have some metrics for their project managers, and other firms don't. And I just wanted to get your feedback on this one.
I think it depends on how you define the key performance indicators and the metrics. I just think you have to define them in some way. Without performance metrics and expectations for what somebody's supposed to contribute, how do you manage them? How do you measure them? And so, some jobs, whether it be a project manager or anybody else in a company, some jobs are easier to create performance metrics for than others. Some you have to get a little creative. But we have to have some type of performance measures, to track and to give people guidance as to how they're performing. The other thing that I think goes unspoken here, that is not talked about enough, is that most people crave feedback. Most people want to do a good job and want to know how they're doing and how they are contributing to the company. And I think it really falls on the organizational leaders to give them those type of metrics so they can aspire to something. And I've been in organizations in my baseball teams where the business owner was out of town, 3 states away, and had a certain perception of what we should be achieving and creating as far as revenue and sales and all that stuff. And it was totally unrealistic because he wasn't in the market every day. And we had to negotiate that. And we did the best we could to fulfill his aspirations. So sometimes business leaders, performance metrics that they want to achieve are not realistic, and you've got to be open to that feedback from your personnel as to what's realistic, and come to an agreement and understanding what people can be achieving, and work together to create something that's realistic. You go back to the SMART goals that everybody knows about SMART goals, June, but I'm sure you've seen it. Nobody really does them very well.
Right.
Oh, I know what they are.
Well, and one of the other things I see a lot that's related to this is that a lot of firms have metrics to measure like a department or division or an office or a group of people, but not like they don't go down far enough. They don't go down to the person level or the project level, and I think that's really important to be able to get a little bit more granular.
Oh, it is. Again, it comes back, I think, to the individual performance. If I have to contribute to a team, I've got to know what my role is and what am I supposed to, contribute. On a baseball team, typically until Cal Ripken Jr. came into the game, most of the times the shortstop, nobody really worried about the shortstop creating offense. This was a defensive position. He had to stop runs from scoring and base runners from moving ahead and not worry about his offense. He could bat ace in the lineup and nobody cared. Whereas the first baseman, the third baseman, the center fielder, these guys were the power positions, always at third, fourth, and fifth in the lineup, and they had certain expectations. They were going to hit so many home runs and drive in so many runs. So everybody has that role that's got to be clearly defined as part of the bigger picture for the team. A baseball team, to get into the playoffs postseason, you probably have to win 90 games. So you have 9 or 10, 11 pitchers on a pitching staff. Their starting pitchers are going to get so many wins. There's an expectation of that, and the bullpen's going to generate so many saves. All those numbers are figured out at some level before the season. This is what my expectation is. You're our number one starting pitcher. You need 15 wins. Something like that. Everybody's looking at those numbers, and then they're measured against it as the year goes forward. And I think the same can be true for these professional service firms. The challenge is, it takes some thought and maybe some creativity. You've got to really look at it and break things down to be effective. And what I'm hearing from you and some others in the field is that they have the belief that you're too busy to take the step back and invest some energy to do this.
Yeah, and it's uncomfortable sometimes to tell people that they are not meeting expectations. So I know you're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go on. Number 6, I know this is one of your favorite ones, Skip. We operate like a family-run business.
Yeah, I've heard that on a number of occasions from prospects and clients that sort of take pride in this. We run like a family business, and I'm not really always sure what that means. I think they mean it's a close-knit organization. We were family-friendly, so if somebody has a family emergency or whatever, we're flexible. We give them flexibility to take time for their family and do those family things. And that's all well and good. The challenge is a lot of families in and of themselves are dysfunctional. Family-run businesses are also exponentially dysfunctional in many ways. And so to use the language that we run like a family business, and we want to create a family business atmosphere, I think is disingenuous and really not where your focus should be. There's not a lot of accountability in families. There's not a lot of candid, respectful feedback in families, and there's a lot of backbiting and arguing and yelling around the holiday dinner table. And so I really think we have to shift our focus away from wanting to run like a family business to defining what that culture means and what it looks like. So we may use the language, but let's get rid of the language and start defining what we want instead, because I think the metaphor of a family business or a family-run business really is not what you want if you really get down deep and think about what a family or family-run business might function like.
Yeah, I can't imagine the Simpsons running a business. That would be interesting, wouldn't it?
I'm sure there's over the last 15 years, I'm sure there's some episode with that in mind.
Right. So if you think about, how, and we're going back to where you come from with the baseball metaphor, but can you imagine the coach? I was just trying to think about this passive-aggressive behavior that I see every day in A&E firms, where people don't really want to give the feedback, right? And the feedback is so important. You can't imagine a good baseball player not being coached, right?
Right.
And so can you just address that, how that lack of feedback, or if you want to reverse it, how that coaching, is so effective?
Yeah, and I think there's two sort of pieces to sort of the passive-aggressive feedback thing that you talk about. One is sometimes it's not really malicious, and the passive-aggressive feedback that people get is nonspecific, and we give it nonspecific, I think, for a lot of the right reasons. We want to be a nice person. We don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. We don't know how to give that candid, direct feedback in a way that is going to be accepted. And so we try to sugarcoat it. We try to skirt around it. We try and be soft, and we hope the person gets it. And that rarely happens, right? The person doesn't get it. So, and then the second aspect is it is very malicious, and we set people up for failure because we consciously choose not to give them direct feedback, and we in many ways throw them under the bus in many ways, and we blame that person because of our own needs or self-esteem or whatever. And so I think there's two ways to look at it from that perspective. But again, in sports, that's not going to happen. Athletes get coached all the time, and they get instant feedback as to how they're doing. Now, the interesting thing, in my level of baseball, I spent half my career of my 20 years, 10 or 11, in short season baseball, which means it's the first or second level for an athlete coming into professional baseball. And they've been so successful before they get to us that many times the coaches won't give them any feedback until they start failing because they're not open to the feedback. So a batter who's used to hitting 300 or 400 or 500 in college, when he comes to pro ball, even though he's switching from an aluminum to a wood bat, and it's a little adjustment, is not really open to taking feedback from a coach until he starts struggling. And so the coaches oftentimes will let them be for 30 days or 15 games or 10 games until they start to struggle with it, where they're open to feedback. And so as a coach in business, you have to know the right time to give feedback, and you have to also develop that relationship over time where the person is going to be open to feedback, and it's got to be framed and couched in the right way. And when it does, you can create tremendous relationships with people because they're growing under you, and you see the growth and they see the growth, and it's really a symbiotic relationship that can be quite rewarding, and it's really up to the manager to be open to be giving candid, direct feedback and setting an expectation at the very beginning of the relationship, and then finding the right time for those conversations, or people are going to fail.
Yeah, and I can remember having times when I was supervising people where they would not get something done that they were supposed to get done, and they would come to me with excuse. I'm busy. I was too busy to get it done. I didn't have time. Lots of different reasons. I couldn't get the resources I needed or whatever it was. And I would be unhappy with getting excuses. And I got to the point where I just said, no excuses. I never want to hear an excuse. I want to hear a solution.
Right.
And they didn't like that too much sometimes, but I think it's part of a culture you get when it gets to the point where people are always giving excuses, and it's okay to do that. So as we all know, you don't get better. You don't improve by giving excuses. So.
Yep. And you've got to set up the culture the right way, and that's some things we can talk about both here and at the summit.
my book, Find the Lost Dollars, I am very focused on profitability. I'm very focused on business management processes, and accountability is a huge part of that, around the whole profitability issue. And I believe you can put a cost to this. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a kind of a generic formula right now, and then I'm going to ask each of you guys on the webinar today to think about what it's costing you in your firm for some of these issues that we just talked about. So this is what I came up with. Let's say that 1 hour a week is wasted because people aren't being held accountable, either because they don't get good direction from their supervisors, they have to do work over again, they have inefficient processes because they're not following processes, so they're doing everything their own way, creating extra spreadsheets, or whatever it is, they're wasting an hour a week. And if you took a $110 billing rate and 48 weeks a year, that gets you to about $5,280 an employee per year. And if you have about 50 employees, I just made up a number here, that would cost you $264,000 a year in wasted time, which could be potentially converted into revenue. And that's a lot of money, especially for a 50-person firm. That would be a great deal of money that I'm sure they'd like to get back. So there is really a cost, and as you start to dissect each of those items that we just talked about, you can start to see how they lend themselves to costing the firm money. Because ideally, in an ideal world, when people are top performers, you're going to get more revenue and greater profitability. So we have a poll question for you today. Leanne, the second poll question. And how many hours a week are wasted in your firm from a lack of accountability?
And again,
so everybody's voting.
Yep, we'll leave it open for a few seconds. About 50% of you have voted.
We're getting higher numbers than I thought we would.
Mm-hmm.
Votes are coming in.
And June, I know we did have one question. If you have a chance, you might take a look at that. I don't know if it ended up kind of getting covered, but after the poll, if you have a chance.
Are you seeing any trends in the AEC industry on actually paying on for performance instead of giving bonuses to everyone? So we'll talk about that in a sec after we get to our poll results. We only have 78% of you voted. I'm hoping that we'll get a few more of you here voting. Well, it looks like everybody stopped voting. So this is what we've got, everybody, and so you can see that this is costing a lot of money. 2% of you said 0 hours are being wasted every week. That's pretty amazing. 10% said 1 to 2 hours a week. 14% of you said 2 to 3 hours a week. 29% of you said 4 to 5 hours a week per employee. And 45% of you said 6 or more hours a week. And that's astounding. I mean, that's about 74% of you are wasting somewhere, but have employees wasting 4 to 6 hours a week. And I can only imagine if you look at that formula that we had above and what that's costing your company, it's a lot of money. It's definitely worth taking the time and effort to start addressing this important issue. And if I go back to the question again that we had, Skip, it's, are you seeing any trends in the A&E industry on actually paying on or for performance instead of giving bonuses to everyone? So the question's really revolving around incentives or incentive plans or performance-based bonuses. And I definitely do see a trend in that. I think it's very hard to implement. I know, Skip, you have some great ideas about effective ways of implementing it. You have to be very careful because you can end up with not getting the kind of measurement that, or not getting the kind of behavior that you want. You create one incentive and you disincentivize teamwork or some other thing that you really do want. So I think it's very important how you put those incentive plans or performance plans together. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, you have to be really clear on what are the behaviors we want to reinforce. And because, again, when it comes to teamwork, especially if you have a project team and the project has a certain profitability or outcome that you want to achieve, is everybody on the team getting some type of performance bonus based on that project or their projects cumulatively throughout the year? And I go back to the baseball analogy, or in sports analogy, in that everybody on the team gets their salary. They individually negotiate that salary, and some player, the third baseman's making $20 million a year, and the shortstop's only in the second year, and he's making $500,000 a year. That's their salary. If they win, when they win, they get a share of the bonus pool, and it's all equal, right? Because everybody contributed in the same way. That's the way it works in sports. So there is, and they all get that championship ring, which is, again, another incentive that everybody wants, and they get to call themselves a champion, which raises their value in the marketplace after the fact. So if you want to reinforce teamwork, you have to create team incentives and team rewards. And again, somebody may be contributing at a higher level and may get a little higher bonus from the team result than somebody else, but it's understood at the very beginning based on roles. And so it is very challenging. You have to really think through what you're trying to reinforce and what behaviors you want to create, and be careful that you're not disincentivizing things and there's unintended consequences.
Right. So now we're going to get to the good stuff. Skip, you're going to teach everybody how you address these issues. So I'm just going to let you go and explain your 6 steps.
All right. Well, this is something that really has been developed just recently in the last, say, 6 or 8 months, based on feedback I've received from audiences across North America doing my seminars on workplace communication, the 7 deadliest communication sins of the workplace, the 4 workplace conversations, and why 75% of them are the wrong conversation. And based on conversations just like we're having now, June, with audience members, and asking them what their biggest challenge is around communication in the workplace, I'd say 70% of people are telling me their biggest challenge with communication is this issue of managing performance and accountability. And so what I've heard from people is that oftentimes we're not good at giving performance feedback and holding people accountable because we, as the organizational leaders, are at fault by not giving people specific performance expectations on the front end. And I've had people, significant numbers of people, probably 60%, tell me in audiences that the reason why I can't hold people accountable and I don't feel comfortable giving people feedback accountable to their expectations is because I was not clear, and I know I was not clear on the front end of setting up the relationship and the job with the individual. And so if we don't have that on this diagram, the poor performance perpetuation spiral, you can see that a lack of specificity in performance expectations causes people to hold back and procrastinating on giving people feedback on direct and candid performance conversations. And so this spiral just goes down and down because we don't have the system set up in place with the performance expectations on the front end at the very beginning, and it just goes down this negative poor performance perpetuation spiral, and it's a tough spiral to get out of. And so when I offer folks some steps to do it with the understanding that this takes a commitment. And I believe if you look at the numbers that June just shared of $264,000 per year, if employees are wasting just 1 hour a week, that's real dollars in some companies with 50 employees. And I can reinforce that number that I think, June, you just calculated on your own as a what if. Research has shown, I've found research from 4 different organizations over the last 5 years that sort of reinforced themselves, showing that the minimum is 40 minutes a day being wasted due to poor and ineffective communication in whatever context in the business. And I'm going through some research myself with a colleague called the Communication Challenge, where we're offering companies an opportunity to take an assessment with their entire organization where they can see exactly how much people are saying they're wasting in the workplace. And 40 minutes a day wasted comes out to very similar dollars to what you're talking about. It comes out to about $5,200 per employee per year being wasted due to poor communication. And most of it is here in this performance management area. So let's go to the next slide. So here's 6 steps, the first of 6 steps, and we're going to go more in depth in this at the summit and give you some real hands-on strategies to apply this and give you some tools to take away from the summit to apply these things. But here's our 6 steps that you can do. Now, number 1 here is apply the clean slate strategy. What does that mean? That means everybody gets a clean slate. I don't care what your performance, your behavior, your attitudes have been to this point. If we haven't set performance expectations up properly, we got to start from scratch. And everybody gets a clean slate starting tomorrow. This picture is actually a photograph of a former New York Ranger hockey player. I'm a New York Ranger season ticket holder. 3 years ago, we got a new coach. And the season ended not the way we wanted to the year before, and the coach obviously was let go. New coach comes in, and he gave out these T-shirts to all the players. Here's a new, fresh opportunity with a clean slate to grab it for your opportunity to be on this team, and everybody starts fresh. You can do the same thing in business. It takes approaching this two ways. One, with a lot of humble pie. We have to have the humility to admit to our organization's people that we have not set the system up for all of us to succeed. It's our fault. We give everybody the benefit of the doubt, clean slate, everybody starts fresh tomorrow. The second part of this, though, is before you offer this, you have to set the system in place so that it's ready to go, because you don't get a second chance to do a clean slate and continue with any type of organizational credibility. So you've got to make sure the systems that we're talking about here, that you and I are talking about, are in place, ready to go, so you can then start fresh with a clean slate. It can be very rewarding and very thrilling for people to get that sense and that feeling, because think about all your employees who you hired, even your poor performers and your worst ones. When they were hired, there was a lot of enthusiasm for you bringing on a new team member and for them with a new opportunity. Somewhere along the way, that was lost. Where was that inspiration, that motivation, that excitement? It was there. Something in the work environment caused that to slip away. And so you can regenerate this if you apply the clean slate strategy. Step 2.
Yeah, it's like starting a new job, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Great.
Step 2. Now, once you have the clean slate strategy, again, this is something that you have to put in place beforehand with all your people, but you want to have new performance and behavior expectations, and maybe these 2 steps should be reversed. But I really like to focus the clean slate concept being the first thing you need to think about creatively and sort of buy into it, and then we take the step back for you to start talking about, okay, what are the systems we have to put in place to make this happen? So you want to create new performance and behavior expectations organizationally, because most companies have all these great values, like organizational values, as to what we're supposed to live by and show up with, but most of it becomes over time corporate graffiti, as one of my colleagues calls it, and it's just a poster on the wall that everybody just walks by and nobody is held accountable to. So we've got to create those behavioral value-based behaviors for the organization and hold people accountable to them, and then each individual person's performance expectations with those metrics that we've been talking about. And when you have those things in place, now you have something of substance. You have a foundation that you can refer back to. And this is, oftentimes this is not something that is just dictated to the employee. This is really a negotiation. You have to go to them and say, here's the role. This is what we need you to fulfill. What do you think is possible here? And what would you like to achieve for us in this role that would be really exciting for you? And you have a discussion. You have a conversation that's mutual, and you come to an understanding as to what that person's role and performance and contribution could be and should be, which goes back to one of the slides early on that June you had put up about helping, the employee understands the value they bring to the company and how it relates to their compensation. So that's step 2. You got to really do the hard work in that. Step 3 is have regular conversations about performance. And regular is not, annual is regular, like it's on a systematic one, right? One conversation per year. But by regular, we mean regular, consistent, weekly, daily. You're having conversations with these people, and you're tracking some of this stuff. And so regular conversations should be somewhat formal, could be somewhat informal, but you should be getting a sense and a gauge of what people are doing, how they're doing, and how they're feeling on a monthly minimum basis. And having a short, imagine if you were to have a short 15-minute, 20-minute conversation with everybody every 2 weeks or every month about how they're doing. And not just about how they're doing, but how the company is doing for them. And we're going to talk at the summit, I'm going to show you in a second, this concept that we have about performance log conversation, that we're actually going to give you a form that you can use at the summit to take back and have a conversation around. It's very simple, and it promotes very easily a two-way dialogue. And that's something we'll talk about in just a second. It's something that might frighten many people on the webinar here, and it's extremely empowering and positive to build a high-performance culture.
So this is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, it's called the performance log. What I call it in my system of the performance management system we call this the performance scorecard conversation, because every person is going to have a performance scorecard, to use the sports theme, based on their performance expectations. Well, the performance scorecard conversation is just a worksheet that people fill out on 4 questions. And there's just one item in each of the 4 questions, because you should only be dealing with one thing at a time if you're doing it consistently enough. Right? Maybe 2 at the most, but what's going to happen is you're going to fill out the form with one thing that you notice that you want, and then the other person is going to bring something to the table. So really you will be talking about 2 things each, and that really is all you should be dealing with, because if you're dealing with more than that, nothing's going to get done. And you've got to identify priorities, right? And that's why we stop having these conversations, because they're so overwhelming. Let's just talk about one thing a month, and let's build a system where we can develop and grow instead of overwhelming us. At the end of the year, we've got so many things that have gone wrong, or so many things that you did well the first half of the year that I can't remember, we never get to talk about. One person in one of my trainings actually said to me, every time we have this annual performance review, it's about what I've done the last 30 days. So I put my energy in the last 30, 45 days, because I know that's all my manager's going to remember. We don't talk about anything that happened 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Nobody remembers it. So we're going to give you a system that will allow you to have these conversations on a regular basis, and it's going to foster mutual conversation, and both the individual and the organization can grow together and keep that dialogue going so that everybody wins. That's step 4. Step 5, provide feed forward. And this is part of the sort of the feedback model. Feed forward is a concept that was, I believe it was started by a man by the name of Marshall Goldsmith, who was an executive coach to CEOs worldwide, multi-million-dollar CEOs. Marshall Goldsmith is the guy who wrote a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it's about the soft skills that leaders need to move up in organizations. It's the hard skills that get you to a position of prominence, but it's the real leadership skills in communication, the soft stuff that will get you farther up the organization and how you treat people. And so one of his concepts for building people up and coaching people is to focus on feed forward. And feed forward is focused on the future. We need to be talking to people about what we want them to do in the future. Most feedback is, June, this is what you did last week or last month. It wasn't good enough, so you need to get better. And we leave it at that. As opposed to saying, June, this is what you've done to this point, and here's what I'd like to see you do better and differently moving forward, and what do you think we can accomplish in the next 30 days, and look at what the future looks like. And by creating a future-focused feed-forward model, it's very aspirational and inspirational because it's something you're moving towards, and you're not constantly getting beaten up about stuff you did last week. You need to use that as a reference point, and we have to give them a vision for what we want in the future instead. And it's a very empowering way to give people insights as to how they can contribute at a higher level. That's provide feed forward. And then step 6 is focus on helping. Boy, there is not nearly enough of this. June, you're talking about your conversations that you had with employees when they were bringing you problems and excuses and no results. And as you were telling me that story, I said, did you ever ask the question, like, what's getting in your way and how can I help you overcome it? Because so many people struggle with stuff and they get blamed for stuff, but things aren't going on. They bring us excuses, but the leaders often just shut down that conversation instead of saying, great, well, this is your excuse. This is the problem, the obstacle that was in your way. How can I help? I mean, if you really look at what a leader's job is, it's to provide the resources to their people to do what they need to do. And those resources could be financial, they could be emotional, they could be technical or tactical. But it's something we have to really invest time in our people to care about helping them succeed. And we have to be proactive as organizational leaders to ask our people what they need from us. How can we help? How can we help move the obstacles for you based on the resources that we have, and what are we not providing that you need? And continue to focus on helping our people do even better instead of just putting more obstacles in their way, and they have to jump through hoops. And I'm sure you've seen some of the systems that people put in place that create more obstacles than problems they solve.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I really could have used your help back then, too.
Well, those are the 6 steps.
Great. So, we all want our teams, our companies to be champions, and we try to summarize this. We all want to have alignment. Everybody needs to be working towards the common goals. We all want our teams to work together. We want our employees to be happy at work and want to be there. And obviously, this all revolves around communication, doesn't it? It's the critical common ingredient in all the issues that we face every day in our businesses. But we summarized it. But lack of accountability ultimately is a communication problem, and that's what I see. It's also a culture problem that translates into a communication problem. There's definitely a cost associated with it, and I believe if you try hard enough, you can measure what that cost is, and you can try to figure out how to reduce that cost. The annual review doesn't work. We saw that, and the year-end bonus for everybody. And that employees need measurable goals, feedback, and mentoring. Does that make sense? So I hope everybody got something out of that. And Skip is offering a free white paper that you can go to improveemployeeperformance.com and download that white paper. It's called The Secret Ingredient to Improving Employee Performance. I'm sure it covers a lot of this stuff, and especially if you want to pass on this information to other people in your firm. And just to summarize, I want to let everybody know a little bit more about our summit that we're having at the end of September. The reason we're having this summit is because most people try to chip away at a lot of the problems that they have in their company when it comes to profitability. And what I saw was a real need to get out of the office and focus for a couple days just on profitability. And I went out and found industry experts and business leaders to come and help our clients to improve their business. We're covering 5 major areas, which is implementing your strategy. And, of course, strategy is what it takes to differentiate your firm and to get ahead. Making your project managers more effective, reducing scope creep. I'm teaching that session. We have Sylvia at Hinge teaching marketing strategies to increase fees, Everybody's complaining about their fees these days. She has some great ideas for that. And then Skip's going to be going into more detail on performance management and how you can start to apply a lot of the things today that we learned today to how to have those conversations and how to put these performance management processes in place at a greater level. And all of our presenters are giving away their proprietary tools, checklists, and templates. For example, in my scope creep process, I'm giving away an actual process template that you can use to put in place at your business to reduce scope creep. I find that most firms don't have a process. I think everybody needs one. And everybody is going to leave this summit with a plan. And so we're going to spend some time at the end developing your plan, what you need to get done, your 2 top priorities, and the resources you're going to need to implement it. We also have a keynote, Ron Culberson, who's a fairly well-known speaker who speaks on humor in the workplace. And, you know, work can get pretty stressful and serious sometimes. And he has some funny stuff to talk about, and that'll be at the dinner that we're having on this Thursday night. This is going to be on a Thursday and Friday in September in Tyson's Corner, Virginia. And then at the end of the summit, we're having a lunch roundtables. We have both an executive one and a project management one, so you can choose which ones you want to join. And then we have a really special event. We're taking all of our clients next door to a VIP reception and giving everybody a test ride on the Tesla. And you're probably wondering what the heck that has to do with business. And what I see that it has to do with business, if you happen to see my blog post that I wrote last week, I'm really impressed with Tesla. You know, they charge a lot for their vehicles, and there's a reason for that. I mean, the automobile industry was already really saturated with a lot of players and a lot of successful companies in the luxury market, but this company was able to break in and really differentiate themselves. And I think if you study their business model and how they've branded themselves in the market, it's a great lesson for all of our clients on how to break away from this commoditization trap that we're all in and try to really differentiate yourself in such a way that you can start to charge more, get noticed, and have people come running for you instead of you chasing them down all the time. So we're going to focus in on Tesla like it's a case study, and I think it'll be really interesting to see how everybody responds. The other thing is Tesla has great design and great engineering, and I think it appeals to the A&E space really well. And so Skip and I are really excited to see. I know some of you who are on this webinar today are already signed up to come to the summit. We're looking forward to seeing you. And we have a special offer for those of you who are not already signed up. Our early bird expired last week, but we really wanted to give you all a little bit more time to learn more about the summit, and so we are offering $100 off. And we also have a business management assessment tool that I will review with you, and so it's an online survey that you give out to your employees, and it starts to pinpoint different areas of your business and where you need to focus on to increase your profitability. And that will be something that you use to prepare for the summit so that you're really focused on those things that are going to get you the biggest impact and financial results. And so if you go to the summit page on our website, you will be able to put in the word performance as a promo code when you register, and you'll get those special offers. And Leanne will be sending an email out, or one of us is sending an email out shortly, which will have you'll be able to download the slides from the presentation today, and or hear the recording, which might be valuable for other people in your firm, and also have a link for you to register for the summit if you're interested. And I really, really look forward to, I hope I can work with you. The summit is really limited. We're only going to have, I don't know, a limited number of people. It looks like somewhere between 50 and 60 people are going to be there focusing on their businesses and they're improving their companies. And I will guarantee results for this. I know I can make a measurable impact on every company that's out there and really help you take a different approach to how you run your business and become more profitable. And I'm really excited about it. I really look forward to working with all of you. If you have any questions about it, please give me a call because, I know that's not something you all are busy. You take time out of your schedules to come. It seems like it's a burden, but I promise you will leave regenerated and ready to attack some of these issues that you have, and with great ideas and great specific tactics that you can use to immediately start seeing some results in your firm. So you can contact Skip or I at the information that's up on the screen if you want to talk with us further, learn more about what we're doing, and I hope that we really offered you some value today, a different way of thinking about what's going on in your firm and what it might be costing you. And Skip, you had some great ideas, and I really, really appreciate your help, and I know you're going to go into a lot more specifics when we see you in September.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. We're going to have fun.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody, for joining us today, and please give us a call if you have any questions, and I look forward to talking with you further. Thank you, Skip.
Right.
Thanks so much for your time.
Yep, thanks, Skip. See you soon.
I just wanted to tell everyone real quickly, be sure to check your spam or junk this afternoon for that email we send using Infusionsoft, and so sometimes those emails do end up in your junk email, but we'll definitely just within probably about 30 minutes be getting you your access to those slides and the recording. Thank you.
Great. And if you don't get it, let us know. We'll get it to you.